Discussion on HR, whose role is increasing, but it is also being outsourced to specialists. Pros and cons of this move and the importance of human resource management in this segment. Well, as Indian businesses go places, its HR needs are also getting specialized. More and more organizations and companies are increasingly outsourcing their HR needs to specialized HR companies. It has a positive effect on the company's overall working, but then there are some hiccups. Here's a report.
With Indian economy betting on double-digit growth, it's predicted that 1.6 million new jobs will be created in 2011. But to find the right employee for an employer can be a difficult process. To provide for these new jobs, HR companies are now pitching in. These HR or staffing companies are specialized in handling and managing human resources.
There is another energy which drives human progress, a much better energy than the hydrocarbon energy, which if you use too much of, actually we are destroying the planet that we are on. What is this other energy that drives progress? It's human energy. This human energy creates the innovations, it creates the ideas, it makes improvements in the use of even the physical energy. And it's this that will ensure that we have a sustainable progress for humanity.
Increasingly, HR has become a back-end process which has helped companies and organizations to focus on their core competence. HR companies provide organizations with human capital as per the needs of the organization. These staffing agencies also take on the challenge of creating employability, providing skilled manpower, especially for fast-developing sunrise industries such as healthcare, hospitality, real estate, and others.
It's really a question of being able to co-hold all the four aspects of the employment. Dignity of employment, security, flexibility, and productivity. This is the only form of employment where we are able to co-hold all the four, in my view. So that's the reason we are saying this could keep the gears of the economy moving very well, and for that the obstacles need to be removed. This industry is the only industry within 3 years where we can create 1.6 million organized sector jobs.
But experts believe that this system does has its own flaws. The parent company sometimes, in order to cut such liability, transfers it to the HR company. Social benefits such as PF, gratuity to the workforce working for HR companies is less than that of social safety net given by parent company to its own employees. It's also believed that organizations and companies shy away from traditional employer-employee relationship and the legal obligation associated with it, and thus resort to HR outsourcing. But the final judgment on HR companies is still to be out yet. Siddhant Sibal's report, DD News, Delhi.
And we're now joined by Mr. H.S. Oberoi, who's the GM HR of Time Education. Thank you, Mr. Oberoi, for joining us here on Business Wrap. You know, we just heard in that package, find the right employee for an employer can be a difficult process. Now, that's a common perception that people have, that although we're churning out graduates every year, but finding the right person for the right job is a difficult process for the HR company. Do you agree with that?
See, identifying the right talent for the right position has always been a challenge. There's nothing new which has come up of late.
Okay.
In terms of how staffing agencies could actually help the organizations achieve it, yes, that helps us expand the talent pool from wherein we could filter in the right kind of a person that we would require for our positions. Having said that, there are obviously, as the initial discussion went on, there are certain pros and cons into it. So, though we get the benefit of having a better talent pool or wider talent pool from wherein we could search our resources, it would also lead into some kind of issues like identifying the cultural fit may become an issue because the staffing agency would not understand the culture that we may have, and thus ending up filtering or shortlisting a person for us based on our culture would always be an issue.
But this is when you're talking about when HR is being outsourced.
Outsourced.
But if I talk about, you know, this whole perception of there being a disconnect between industry and education, disconnect between what industry really needs and the kind of education that's being imparted to the people out there who are the future employees, of the industry itself. Do you think there's a disconnect, and do you think industry needs to play a greater role so that they can bridge this gap?
I would agree with that. In terms of what we are giving as an education, our education is in line in terms of what theoretical knowledge and any person who is getting employed in the long run would require. However, the employability would also depend upon the actual application of that knowledge. I would personally believe, and this is the belief going on right now, that the employability factor, the actual application of that knowledge, is not necessarily taught only in the institutes. There is a lot of hand-holding being done, a lot of tie-ups being done between institutes and different organizations, wherein this thing is coming up. Having said that, it's still a long way to go. We are on the path. It will require a bit of more efforts.
Okay. You also talked about the pros and cons of outsourcing HR management to specialized companies. Now, do you think that's one reason that attrition rate is on the rise, because it's being outsourced? And like you said earlier, that they have difficulty in finding the right talent for the kind of company that they are probably staffing for, because they don't understand the culture, be it any kind of culture, be it the work culture or the kind of work that the person needs to do.
See, it is partially correct.
Okay.
The reason I would say partially is that a staffing agency or a HR outsource organization, that outsourcing organization would not understand the exact fit what a parent organization would require.
So then why is it being outsourced in the first place?
See, it depends upon how does the partnership between the parent company as well as the HR consulting company goes.
Okay.
If the partnership extends only to the limit that the HR let's say outsourcing organization is only supposed to provide the resumes and nothing beyond it, there would always be a lot of difficulties in finding the right fit.
Okay.
If the partnership goes beyond that and the staffing agency is actually involved in trying to understand what kind of person is required, and a lot of brief is given in terms of what exactly beyond the numbers and the data mentioned on resume is required in that individual, then it could actually lead to some better results. It depends on what kind of relationship a parent company and a staffing agency would actually share.
That's just about the staffing agency, but HR actually encompasses more than just staffing. So tell us about the importance of HR to actually increase productivity of the company. See,
for example, we discussed about the employability factor, that the institutes are not actually delivering the a person who is readily employable from day one. A lot of training, a lot of hand-holding is required from the internal HR people in terms of making that resource productive.
Okay.
For example, let's take an IITian who is coming out right out of IIT and getting employed in one of the software industry. Having basic knowledge, yes, the IIT would have actually prepared that individual with basic knowledge. But how to actually use that knowledge, how to impart that application part of it, how to understand that it could be used in the way that the team environment does not get suffered, the overall project deliverability does not get suffered, that hand-holding and that delivery is taken care by the HR people through the line management. And that would actually help the employability of that resource.
And how important is HR actually to increase the productivity of the industry?
It is. See, to again take the same example, time education is right now into the education industry. We are teaching students in terms of what is required to actually become better managers. Now, from HR front, the same kind of training is required for internal employees, who in turn can actually go ahead and, in our scenario, can impart similar training to the students, which would help the productivity of overall sector to go up. You take it out of from education industry and go to the traditional industry or to the new age industry. HR people would always be there with the help of line managers, ensuring that the overall employability or let's say the training required to make somebody more productive is there, who in turn could actually help not only the organization but also the sector grow by inviting the more business from different areas.
But for an employee, it's also very important for his career growth. job satisfaction is very important, and at the end of the day, for the company, it's all about numbers. I mean, how productive a person is going to be. So there's a fine balance between what you do for the employee and what you do for the company. So how is that balance actually met?
See, an employee is satisfied with the organization provided he or she sees the growth that the person aspires for. The organization would also be very happy if a person stays loyal for as long as possible. So that bridge is to be made, and that bridge can be made by people like in HR.
Okay.
See, for HR, people would understand what the organization is looking for in an individual. He would also bridge the gap by understanding what a person is aspiring to be. And if that roadmap can be made across, it may not be possible at all the given times.
Sure.
Having said that, if it is possible at the most of the times, it will not only help the employee, it will also help the organization. That bridge has to come from HR.
Okay. We'll continue our discussion, but first let's take a look at what's the view from HR companies. Recently, 8 HR firms came together to form Indian Staffing Federation, or the ISF, which aims at making the country's fast-growing staffing sector more organized. Planning Commission member Arun Myra welcomed the move and complimented the founding members for this initiative. He also invited ISF to be part of the working group on labour laws in the 12th plan.
How big is this industry in India?
It's about 11,000 crores as of now. The 8 of us who are part of the Indian Staffing Federation contribute to about 50% of the revenue in India.
They are now, instead of the back-end support, they are seen as a strategic support for employers.
That's right. So today, if you look at many of the large companies in India, they're trying to integrate all the workforce under a staffing company, and they're able to drive them towards greater productivity. Okay, rather than keep them under 100 different people and not being able to integrate. Today, if you look at FMCG, large companies are today able to centrally say, look, this is the productivity I seek from my secondary sales force, which may be on the roles of the staffing companies spread across the country. They're able to drive productivity centrally. That's a key advantage of staffing at a large level. Yeah.
And how can they improve the situation of workforce?
You see, today if you look at Europe, where much of these staffing agencies originate, if today Netherlands farmer who does agriculture wants to hire a farmhand for a tulip plucking, for instance, he invariably calls a workforce agency, okay, which will come and give the person there. I think many of these countries, as they were transforming, have started using these agencies as governance institutions to kind of implement the labor law properly. Labor law implementation will be a lot better because you are dealing with organized entities here.
So, what's your demand from the government? Any support?
Yeah, many things. One of the first things we are asking is relook at the Contract Labour Regulation and Abolition Act, which was meant for a different era. I mean, today it's become very repressive, and definitions of principal employers, definitions of what is perennial work, what is temporary work, all this needs to get relooked at. In short, whatever was created for the British era should have ceased with that. Unfortunately, it has really continued, and this is leading to lower job creation in the organized sector.
All right, let's continue our discussion. Before you actually pick up an important point you made about labor laws, let's go back to the point you were making about loyalty and how HR management actually ensures loyalty. But don't you think attrition rate is on the rise, and what are the key reasons behind it? Also brain drain. I mean, we're not just talking about attrition happening in India, we're also talking about the brain drain, which has always been a problem concerning India, because our workforce is going abroad and working because they find better working conditions there.
See, let's take these points one by one. You talked about attrition first of all. With the growing projects in India, whether it is from companies abroad or whether it is about generating our own projects in different areas, be it IT, be it biotechnology, be it the EPC industry. With larger influx of projects and less manpower which is actually trained and experienced in that area, the attrition rate is bound to grow.
Okay.
if you look at it, IT industry had a very bad attrition rate around 4-5 years back. It has averaged out now, simply because there are larger workforce which is in that area now, which is helping the organization to manage the attrition in a better manner. Some of the sectors have grown up, some of the sectors are still maturing. So that will remain till the time we get that employability factor in. We get people who can start being employed or being productive from day one. Brain drain, yes, that has been a problem for some time. To some extent, it is still a persistent problem, simply because in Indian sectors we don't have enough opportunities wherein the hardcore R&D could be involved, though it is growing up now. The sunrise sectors like pharmaceuticals, the biotechnologies is actually helping that brain drain to be minimized and within the acceptable limits. Though yes, a lot of work still needs to happen. Right now we are still into that area. We are still working towards increasing those R&D opportunities which people believe is better outside India. That perception has to change.
That perception has to change. Quickly, let's talk about the labor laws. Now, the report also read out that the parent company sometimes, in order to cut its liability, actually transfer HR solutions. So, how does that really work? And is that the truth that it's being actually outsourced so that liability can be cut, because then you don't have to think about gratuity, provident fund, things like that?
Not necessarily. See, when for any such agreement where a parent company would have with any HR outsourcing organization, that agreement would also entail all such benefits. So the belief that HR is outsourced simply to cut across and cut through the corners as far as liabilities are concerned, it's not the case. It is not necessarily because of only that. Yes, dealing with one resource, which is this organization, the HR organization which is outsourcing the resources to you, that could be a bit of help. But that does not mean the liabilities are not taken care of.
All right, Mr. Oberoi, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us on this discussion today.
Thank you very much.
We'll take another break here. Stay with us. More news on the other side.